Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become the best person that you can be. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about the book After Sinai. Its author is Mike Shelton. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Mike Shelton. Thank you so much.
Good morning.
For here, Daily Spark. Thank you. So glad that you are here. Now, as is tradition here on the show, before we start talking about your book, we give every author an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps those few people out there that are unfamiliar with you or your work. So what makes you you? What makes Mike Mike?
Well, that is a long question. As I say to a lot of other people, I'm a complex kind of guy. I'm not a simple kind of guy. I have lived in Yuma, Arizona, where I am now since 1990 after completing a master's degree in Bernard Baruch College, University of New York. And before that, I lived in Phoenix, where I was a producer-director with public broadcasting and worked in radio, both classical music and Christian radio. I've also been very community involved. I was so in Phoenix as the 24-year-old chairman of a 51-member board. I called it 4 years of assertiveness training. Now I'm in Yuma, where I went to after completing my master's degree, where I've worked in the city administration, and I've also been a substitute teacher in middle school and high school and full-time in our community college. So I have kind of a mixed bag background. I'm also big into science fiction and drama. I've given a 1 hour, one-man show on the book of Job and also on being Superman. And I guess I'll leave it at that. In terms of the personal stuff, I was married for 10 years to my lovely wife, Sharon, who I met online. She came to me from Missouri. She was given to me and taken away from me 10 years ago by non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I am not married and I have no children. Essentially, my children are the people I serve. I'm a great believer in public service.
I am so sorry of the passing of your wife, but I do love that you mentioned her and you honored the love that the two of you have. That is a beautiful thing. You know, you're right. I have a lot of friends that have never married, but they also don't have children, and they say the same thing too. The children that I work with, be it that they're a teacher or in some form of public service, those are my kids, and I'm able to, because I don't have my own, I'm able to love on them and teach them and still pass on the wisdom. And it's like, isn't that really what it's all about anyway? Is that making sure that we're assisting that next person and that the wisdom doesn't leave with us, that we
That is true.
I love it. And I tell them, especially the women, I said, but that makes you the best godmothers and the best, aunties or the guys, the best uncles in the world, because you're able to give that attention from a different perspective and share that wisdom. So it is. I try to find the silver lining in most things. So you're right.
One thing I often do when I'm teaching and I'm talking to other faculty, one advantage, if you want to call it that, in not being a parent, is that I don't see the children as my children. I see them as my customers. And my obligation is to give them the best experience they can have as my customers. So I'm not looking to beat them up or talk them down. I'm there to lift them up and inspire them and have them buy into the product of education. So that's how I think.
I like that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it is all about how you see people. How you treat people is according to how you see them. So you are so right. I like that. I might have to use that example to when I explain it to someone else. I like that.
You may quote me all you want.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely will. Because my listeners here know that I do talk about past guests. You know, I may not mention a name, but I will say, yeah, I talked to a person and they said that. And the people that listen on a daily basis, thank you guys for tuning in every day. They know who I'm talking about too. So absolutely. Now, being an author, is that something that you always wanted to do? Or did you find that that was just the next thing along your life path?
When I was in high school, I set several goals to myself, and one of them was to be a published author. I wasn't too successful early on, but I'd say like 10 or 15 years after high school, I wrote my first book, which is called The Impatience of Job, an original adaptation of the Book of Job that I turned into a one-man show, although I do have it in book form. The book never sold, but people liked my one-man show. But later on, I worked on several other books, the one we're going to talk about, and one which hasn't been published yet, which is called Seventh Grade, We All Have a History. And I give a one-year biography of my life, which is a very touching and very powerful overview. But yes, I've always wanted to, among the other things I wanted to. I wanted to be in radio. I wanted to be in television. I wanted to be in public service. So I just do one thing after another. I haven't been into space yet, but I plan to.
Well, listen, we cannot knock anyone's hopes, dreams, and aspirations around here because I am on radio right now because of a prayer I prayed many years ago, and I have been blessed to be able to walk in the manifestation of that prayer. So I definitely understand what you mean about that. Now, the title of your book, After Sinai, that's just the title without the subtitle. I'm going to ask you to explain the title and the subtitle. How did you come about such a curious title name for your book?
Well, it's not that hard. Most of the action in the Exodus account takes place after the Ten Commandments. Not before, it's after. Now, most of us have seen the movies like Charlton Heston as Moses and Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. And there are several others. There's one in which Christian Bale, a.k.a. Batman, plays Moses. Those are the two that I know the best. And in every account I have ever seen, the action essentially stops with the giving of the commandments, with a little bit afterwards, Moses doesn't make it to the promised land. He gets to look at it, and it's bye-bye. The show is over. But the fact is that most of what the Exodus account is about takes place after the commandments. There are a number of, I'll say, hidden stories, not well-known stories that take place between Mount Sinai and the wilderness. And just as in history, let's compare the American slaves with the Exodus slaves, for lack of a better word. After the Civil War is over, it's not, yay, we're all free, everything's great now. No, it's not. Thousands of slaves die by disease in the 1860s. There's a great deal of discrimination. Segregation is introduced. Jim Crow is introduced. Sharecropping is introduced. It's actually a very long haul that we're not quite over with yet, some 150 years later. In the case of the Egyptian generation, as I call the Israelites who leave Egypt, it's going to take not just a century, it's really gone for over 3,000 years. So it's not just, oh, we hit the promised land, yay, we're all in great shape, milk and honey, we got it made. No, we have a warrior people who have to fight war after war after war millennia after millennia, and that isn't over. That doesn't mean that the former American slaves want to go back to Dixie, and it doesn't mean the current people of Israel want to go back to Egypt and the pyramids. But there's a great deal to cover between then and now. And that's what I look to do, is to cover that ground in my essay, because it's 80 pages. It's really more of an extended essay than a book as such. And what I do is give an alternative history in the shoes of the Jews. And what I focus on are the complaints of the Israelites, not the usual stuff you would see in the Sunday school.
Right. Okay. Oh, I like that. That's a little different. Now, did you have a particular inspiration for the book? Like, was there one thing in particular that really prompted you that said, okay, now is the time to start writing this book? What got you going?
Yes, actually, and I even say so in the book. What was my inspiration? In the chapter that's entitled After Sinai, My Boy Is Just Like Me, Moses Made Over. This is the period going into the wilderness. And I entitle the subpiece, The Man Picking Up Sticks, in Numbers chapter 15, 32, 33, and 34. It's really a very small piece, and if I may, I'll read a bit out of it. Is that okay?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
It says, while the Israelites were in the desert, a man was found gathering wood on the Sabbath day. Those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moses and Aaron and the whole assembly. And they kept him in custody, because it was not clear what should be done to him. Then the Lord said to Moses, the man must die. The whole assembly must stone him outside the camp. So the assembly took him outside the camp and stoned him to death, as the Lord commanded Moses. And I go on here. Even though a law mandating death for breaking the Sabbath was known by everyone, the man finding the stick picker upper were not confident going that far without a word from Moses. Nothing is recorded from Aaron or the elders. It's all up to Moses. As usual, no one hears God except Moses. The Israelites have already been condemned in Numbers 14 to spend the rest of their lives wandering the Sinai desert. You're going to impose the death sentence at this point? God does. According to the writing, Moses, without argument, agrees. This is not the Moses who respectfully begged God to spare the Israelites for far worse, who asked God to remove his name from the book of life in exchange for the people after the golden calf incident. This is not the man who pleaded with God again and again to spare his people who had already suffered so much. What did it matter? Who did it hurt? This one nameless soul picking up wood on the Sabbath. You're walking in this damn desert with nothing to do except survive. The man's life hangs in the balance of Moses' word. If he says, let him find wood for the whole assembly for the next 7 days, or exile him, that would have been accepted. God would have been mad, but God at this point was always mad. How did he even know God was really speaking to him, giving a message like that? Take him out. Moses at this point, with a single individual, shows the hard-heartedness of the God of Sinai, ending one life in obedience to a rule, showing rules are more important than any human life. This would be in contrast to Jesus, who says, is it better to leave a man sick or to heal him on the Sabbath? And heals him, or rescues an animal in a ditch on the Sabbath rather than let him suffer. Anyone not angered by the God who says kill him and the Moses who came out with that death sentence doesn't have a soul. So that is what inspired me to put pen to paper and really think through the entire Exodus narrative. And so I went through the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, with multiple versions of the Bible and decided to give a full timeline, a full narrative, kind of stripped of all of the wondering about what ornaments to wear and what kind of clothes to wear, and just take you on a journey like you would with Time magazine doing history of the Vietnam War, let's say, and take you from the burning bush to the burning wilderness, so you could see what happened and the details that happened in between. And I give you the timeline that occurs throughout. So, but that was the singular incident that made me think I had to write about this.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad, that you did. It is time for us to go to break. But before we do, Mike, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, let's do it all together. The book is After Sinai. It is available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. And you can be in touch with me on, you can just email me at Mikshelt, MIKSHELT, at MSN.com. And I'll repeat that, MIKSHELT at MSN.com.
All righty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Mike Shelton, and we're talking about his book, After Sinai. Now, Mike, my next question for you is, and it's something that you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, and that is that you said that you've written the book from the perspective of the complaint by the Jews. What are some of the threads that you actually tackle or that you address, and why did you choose to include them in that fashion?
Well, let's start with the last part first. When reading about the complaints of the Jews, the complaints of the Hebrews, I compared that with what's normally said in the church, including my churches. Normally, one is thinking, well, those Jews were just faithless. They didn't believe God. If they had just listened to him, things would have been all right. But in terms of my reading, I don't find that to be true. I don't find them to be faithless. And then the one great thing about the Bible, that it is a teller of truth. And no matter what you're looking for, the Bible is going to tell you the truth about things. Now, sometimes we may sugarcoat it, we may whitewash it, but boy, there it is, right there, horror, genocide, raising people from the dead, whatever it happens to be, the Bible is going to be telling it. So from the time the 2 million people, and that's how many are leaving Egypt, 2 million people, that's over 600,000 men, and then you just speculate about 600,000 women and 600,000 or more children, and then the older people and the widows who are coming through, plus some animals and stuff, crossing through the Red Sea. And we know the Red Sea was parted supernaturally by the hand of God, because the Bible says they crossed on dry land. You're not just going to get dry land because it just was gone for a day. It's because of the supernatural impact God had. After the Red Sea, everything's starting to go south. I show how they're complaining about the lack of water. You have 2 million people. You need to let that sink in. It's like 2 million people from Phoenix, Arizona, that's about as hot as the Sinai, are told to leave their cars and walk through the Sonoran Desert with nothing but the clothes on their back and a few chickens. And there's not much water to be had. So the people are complaining about the lack of water, and God is mad because they're complaining about the lack of water. They're going through hardships, going through several months to the Sinai mountain, where they're going to stay for 2 years. And that's really a barren desert. It's very hard to live. And then they're expected to engage in wars, which they do with the Amalekites. And Moses makes it clear that God isn't going to intervene and destroy the Amalekites from on high. we're going to have to do it ourselves. So in my chapter, The Making of a Refugee Army, I talk about what it's like for the Israelites to go to war and having to deal with that, something they didn't expect when they were told they were going to the land of milk and honey. But there's a part in my book in which we're talking about the various things that they really had to do in order to survive in spite of their complaints, and how those complaints were responded to. In the chapter, pardon me, what was that?
Oh, no, I was just, please forgive me for cutting you off. I want you to complete your thought, but I also want to ask you the next question of, you also talk about the hidden stories that usually get stored there as well. So please complete your thought, though. But I want to make sure that you get to the hidden stories as well.
Sure, no problem with that at all. One of the hidden stories I'll call Breakfast with God in Exodus 24. I believe it's verses 7 through 9, but certainly in Exodus 24. And in this story, God calls on Aaron's sons, and Abidu and Nadab, and 70 elders of Israel to go up and meet God. And there's like some kind of transition, almost like you're entering a spacecraft. And I'm going to say it's a spacecraft. I'm going to say they're walking to a different dimension with God. And it says that the ground is like sapphire, like as clear as the waters. And there they see God. They drink with God. They eat with God. So I don't know what to do with you on like no man has seen God, because we had about 80 people who sat there, ate and drank, and saw God. And literally saw him, ate with him, and drank with him. Now, after that, Moses is going to go to the top of the mountain. Everybody else is going down. That's one of the stories. Another one is when Aaron's sons have been training to go into priesthood, and they're going to go to the tent of meeting. And in this tent of meeting, this is like something out of Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a ceremony to be performed, and when it's done right, according to the rules of God, there's fire from heaven that comes into the tent and does stuff. And everyone cheers and says, oh, there's the Lord our God. Well, the sons of Aaron take a shortcut, and they do something that God doesn't approve of. And the fire from heaven comes and consumes them and kills them. And right after that, I believe this is in Leviticus 10, right after that, there's a narrative where Moses is talking to Aaron, and most of the commentaries I've read say that Aaron is just quiet, and he's sorry for the way that his boys have overstepped themselves. I don't take it that way. I take it that Aaron, who was a spineless jellyfish at the golden calf event, in which he let everybody like walk all over him and worship the golden calf and couldn't do anything about it. And God promises to visit the sins of the fathers upon the sons, visited this upon Aaron. And it becomes really a very ironic and sad tale that goes on then. So as part of the Exodus event, before we leave Sinai, those are a couple of the hidden stories that I've never heard talked about that are present in the narrative.
I like that. And thank you for giving some examples of that. Now, you have a chapter in the book called The Making of a Refugee Army. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. In that chapter, there isn't a great deal said about it except in the Bible, except that you're going to have a certain number taken from every tribe of the people of Israel in order to make up an army. And what is not well known is that Moses, prior to leaving and coming back at 80 years old to see the burning bush, Moses himself was a military leader. Moses commanded an army of the Egyptians to go into Ethiopia, and I'll say run those guys ragged, teach them don't mess with Egypt. So Moses is a man with military experience. He knows what to do with an army. The Amalekites and others are a threat to the freed slaves of Egypt. And I want to remind people, nobody told them they were going to have to fight a war. They've been in captivity for 4 centuries. They've been under the whip of the Pharaoh. And if anybody raised their fist, that fist was cut off. So there weren't many rebellions over there. So they had to learn how to fight for themselves. And even before this, when I'm looking at Exodus 23 verses 20 to 33, there's a whole lot of promises that are made prior to becoming an army, that an angel would guard them, that an angel would take them to the place God promised, the implications that the angel would speak to them, that the angel would wipe out the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites specifically. And so they were promised that once they had to deal with people, that they would be supernaturally taken care of. But that would not be the case. Instead, they were to have men from every tribe, 20 years of age and older, for a total of 603,550, according to Numbers chapter 1, verse 46. And each tribal leader appointed and numbered the soldiers per tribe. So that was like evenly divided from the tribes to form an army, specifically 12,000 for each of the tribes of Israel. And the unfortunate thing, from my standpoint, the book of Numbers gives numbers as to what this army of former slaves is doing. And quoting verse 32, the plunder remaining from the spoils that the soldiers took was 675,000 sheep, 70,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, 32,000 women who had never slept with a man. How they knew they hadn't slept with a man, I don't know. But it shows that instead of oppressed people learning how to be sympathetic and empathetic toward people who've also been oppressed, they became the oppressors. They took on that mentality instead of rejecting that mentality. But I make a reference to a movie of Moses made from 2014 called Gods and Kings. That was the one in which the Christian Bale / Batman revealed that side of Moses that we normally don't hear about, being that Moses who was a military leader. But in another Moses movie called The 10 Commandments, not the Cecil B. DeMille one, but a 2006 ABC television miniseries that I just happened to come across. And so I'm fulfilling my book, starring Doug Ray Scott as Moses. Mind you, I don't know who the man is, but that's his name. And in this series, it, I'll say, amplifies what's going on fighting the Amalekites, in which Moses tells his people, God ain't getting in between this one. We've got to fight for ourselves. And so they do. And I found that one thing that Moses says after the battle is over that's reminiscent of Jesus Christ Superstar, he's talking to God. I mean, they do win the battle, but at the 2-hour, 6-minute point on the video, he's saying this to God. Have we pleased you? Did we pass the test? How many tests like this will you send us? We fought and won today. Will we have to keep fighting to show we are worthy of you? How many battles like this will we have to fight to prove that? And Moses exhales with the deepest exhaustion and walks through the strewn masses of bodies felled by sword and arrow. Now, this part isn't in the Bible. This part is in the miniseries. But I think it's faithful to it. I think it amplifies what had to have happened. You had face-to-face, hand-to-hand fighting with a brutal enemy, and you had to be as brutal as they were in order to beat them. This wasn't what they were signed on for. That wasn't part of the burning bush. But they were forced to go into that situation where they had to face the neighborhood enemy, so to speak, or die.
That is so true, so true. And what a great place to take a break. This is going to be our last break in the show, but we do need to take it. Mike, before we do that, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
It's After Sinai, and you can get a copy going right on site with Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. Easy to do. Just go on there. I go on Amazon.com all the time, so I'll just direct you to Amazon.com, put in the search window After Sinai or my name, Mike Shelton, and you'll go right there.
Gotcha. Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for spending time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. You know who I am. My guest today is Mike Shelton, and we're talking about his book, After Sinai. I love it. Well, Mike, I just have a few more questions for you, and thank you for spending time with me today. And that is, what would you have the readers of your book take away from your book? What main message do you want to make sure that they understand?
Well, thinking of a reviewer who bought my book on Amazon.com, he described himself as a very serious Christian. And in reading the book, he had nothing but praise for it. And said what he got from it that no other source had was that it answered many of his questions that had gone unanswered about the Exodus event after reading my book. I wouldn't say my book is inspirational. I'd say it's informational, and it's explorational. What I do is look in detail, and I think answer questions that people have had for a very long time, but never found a place to get them. And if I don't answer them all, at least give you some, I'll say, rungs on the ladder to climb towards some. So that would be one thing. The other would be to have an even greater respect for the people of Israel, for what they had to go through to make it to the other side, and even to be alive now. That they had to be some extraordinary people to stay alive, to quote the movie Staying Alive.
I love it.
Staying alive.
My next question for you is, and I always ask authors this question, and that is about what comes next. With many people, they write a book and they're happy with that. They have no desire to write anymore. But others have gotten bitten by the author bug. Where do you think that you stand? Do you plan on writing any new books in the future?
Well, yes. Well, I've already completed my book, 7th grade. We all have a history, and I'm looking for somebody to publish that, which talks about my life in 7th grade, and it was my teaching 7th grade that got me to coalesce my thoughts and put my own life into perspective as to what my life in 7th grade was like. It was a very telling year for me. But in terms of After Sinai, my initial instinct was to create a fictional account with me as a 10-year-old in Egypt with the Israelites, living through that entire period, from the time of slavery to a walking perspective, walking through the Red Sea, looking at everything I'm talking about, all the way through the wilderness period, only except for the other Israelites. I escape. I get out. I don't die in the sand. So I kind of like break the mold in that way. So I'll probably write about that. That'll probably be 2 or 3 times as long a book as this is.
And why not? I love it. Now, last question.
Yeah, that's what I would have done this time, but it was taking me too much trouble, so I went ahead and did a straight narrative.
Now, my last question for you is that bit of advice for someone who is out there who believes that, you know, being an author is their dream as well, and they really want to get started, but they're afraid to take that first step to get out there and get going. Do you have any words of encouragement for them to you know, get them off the mat and into the game?
Well, all I can suggest is doing what I did. I wrote parts of the book while I was substituting in school. So when I had breaks, I was making notes. The thoughts come to mind. I wrote them on my desk while the students were working. And I did my final drafts in Jack in the Box. I went to a local Jack in the Box down the street from me and just had a couple of different kinds of the Bible. I had my writing pads. I like to write by hand first and then go on the computer in my final work. So that's how I did it. But I say give yourself a deadline, the most important thing. During the summer, I just said, I'm going to get this thing done. And I got this thing done. I'm still making a little revisions from time to time. I find I could say something a little bit better, but the main part done. So just use your life as it is. Create space to write, to put your thoughts down, believe in what you are doing. The first person you need to please is you. Everybody else comes dead last. So you make sure you're happy with your work, and then everything else will follow.
Absolutely. I think that is a great bit of advice. Well, Mike Shelton, thank you so much for coming on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela and spending time with us here today and, you know, giving everyone a bit of inspiration. Before I let you go, though, can you remind everyone one last time, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
So let's look at the last part first. You can email me, mikshelt@msn.com, mikshelt.com. You can get the book through Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. You can buy it that way. I buy a hardcover book, or you can get an ebook. And so do that. In fact, I'll tell you what, if you're part of a church and you want to use this as a discussion book, you can buy like 100 at a time and have a great discussion as well as make me happy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Mike, for being on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. And listeners, thank you as well for spending time with us here today. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it with us, and we are so grateful for that. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to be your best. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember, you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.